The agenda had 14 items. Nobody expected trouble until at least item 9. The Galactic Coordination Council met every quarter in the Great Chamber of Sun Station, a place so old and so thoroughly neutral that even the walls seemed bored. Delegates from 31 species sat in their assigned tiers, assistants behind them, translation devices humming softly. The lighting was adjusted to suit every known form of vision. The temperature was a compromise that satisfied no one completely. Ambassador Drail of the Vorith Collective opened the third item on the agenda with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this 800 times. The Council needed a host world for the new Pan-Galactic Diplomatic Exchange Center. A permanent site. Neutral ground. Somewhere stable, cooperative, and, he stressed this word with practiced delicacy, predictable. He had prepared a list of 12 candidate worlds. He began reading them out. Each name was followed by a short summary. Quiet planet. Long history of cooperation. No significant conflicts in the last 2 centuries. Reasonable infrastructure. Standard stuff. The kind of names that got written down, debated politely, and voted on without anyone raising their voice. He was on candidate number 7 when the human delegate raised her hand. Her name was Yeva. She was a junior attaché from the Earth Diplomatic Corps, and she was not supposed to be here. Ambassador Roth, her superior, had woken up that morning with a fever so aggressive it had surprised even him. He had told her to sit quietly, take notes, and under no circumstances speak unless directly addressed. Counselor, the translation device, carried her voice cleanly across the chamber. I'd like to suggest Earth. Drail stopped reading. The chamber did not go silent immediately. It went silent in stages, like a crowd realizing one by one that something unusual had just happened. The Sonari elder in the second tier set down his ceremonial cup. The Polhari ambassador leaned over to his assistant and said something quietly. The assistant's color changed in a way that had no good translation in any human language, but roughly meant, she did not just say that. She had just said that. Yeva looked around at the room. Nobody was looking at their notes anymore. Everyone was looking at her, or at their translation devices, or at each other with expressions she could not fully read, but which shared a general quality of alarm. Did I say something wrong? She asked. Nobody answered right away. Oris, the Council's chief protocol officer, a short and very solid Brellan who had managed sessions for 30 years without once losing his composure, was gripping the edge of his console with both hands. Not in anger, more in the manner of a person who has just seen something coming toward them and is bracing for the impact. Drail recovered first. He was a professional. The delegate from Earth, he said carefully, has proposed Earth as a candidate. The motion is technically in order. The Council will note it. That was when the shouting started. It did not start all at once. It started with the Vorith attaché on Drail's left, who said something to the delegate beside him that was clearly not intended for the translation system, but got picked up anyway. Then the Sonari elder stood up. Then 2 of the Brenali delegates began speaking over each other. The translation system, which was very good but not designed for 12 simultaneous inputs, began producing a sound like 3 languages arguing inside a single word. Yeva sat very still. She was trying to figure out if she had made a mistake. She did not think she had made a mistake. Earth had good infrastructure. Earth was centrally located on 3 major transit lanes. Earth had been a full council member for 11 years and had never missed a dues payment. These seemed like positive qualities in a host world. She pulled up her tablet and started reviewing Earth's diplomatic file, looking for whatever was causing this reaction. She found the history section. She scrolled past it. She had grown up with that history. It did not seem alarming to her. She checked the biology section. She scrolled past that too. Then she found the appendix. The one labeled, in the dry language of galactic bureaucracy, notable cultural and behavioral observations, supplementary file. She read 3 entries. She closed the appendix. She was beginning to understand. Drail called for quiet. The chamber did not immediately provide it. He called again, louder. The noise reduced to a restless murmur. Around the room, delegates were pulling up their own files. Data terminals were lighting up. Several ambassadors were reading very quickly and not looking happy about what they were finding. The delegate's motion has been registered, Drail said. A formal briefing will be required before the vote. We will reconvene after a short recess. He looked at Yeva. His expression was difficult to read. It was not hostile. It was the expression of a person who had spent 800 years making sure things stayed orderly and was now watching something disorderly approach at speed. "Delegate," he said. "Is your superior available?" "He's sick," Yeva said. Drail looked at her for a moment longer. Then he looked at Oris. Oris shrugged with 4 of his 6 shoulders, which in Brellan culture meant something between, "I warned you," and "let's see where this goes." The recess was called. In the hallway, Yeva found a quiet corner and called Ambassador Roth. He picked up on the second ring, voice rough with fever. "How's it going?" he asked. She told him. There was a long silence on the other end. "Yeva," he said, "I told you not to speak." "I know," she said. Another silence. "Did you at least mention the infrastructure proposals?" She had not. She went back inside. Oris had survived 30 years of council sessions. He had managed translation failures, walked out ambassadors, one minor interstellar incident involving a misplaced flag, and a vote that had to be held 3 times because nobody could agree on what the question meant. He was not easily rattled. He was, right now, a little rattled. The task was straightforward on paper. Before the council could formally consider Earth as a candidate host world, a standard planetary briefing had to be delivered. Planet, population, political structure, history, infrastructure. Every candidate world went through the same process. It usually took about 12 minutes, sometimes less. Oris pulled up Earth's file. He read the first section. Standard enough. 3rd planet in a single star system. 1 large moon, unusually big relative to the planet's size. Atmosphere breathable by most known species. Surface mostly water. Fine. Normal. He scrolled down. He reached the history section. He read for a while, without speaking. Then he looked up at the assembled chamber, at 31 delegations watching him expectantly, and he made a decision. The full file was part of the public record. He was required to present it. He would present it. Professionally. He cleared his throat and began. The first few minutes went smoothly. Population, 8 billion. Political structure, a federated system of nation-states operating under a shared planetary council. 11 years as a full galactic member. Infrastructure rating, adequate to strong. Spaceport capacity, for major orbital stations, 12 surface-side launch facilities. Then he reached the history section and read the first line out loud. Humanity has survived 14 distinct near-extinction level events in recorded history, not including pre-recorded prehistory, during which an estimated 6 to 8 additional population collapse events likely occurred. The chamber was quiet. Oris kept reading. He read about the wars. Not 1 or 2, not a contained regional conflict, but centuries of them, stacked on top of each other, overlapping, pausing, resuming. He read about the plagues, about the famines, about the period humans called the climate crisis, during which large parts of their planet became functionally hostile to habitation, and humanity responded by adapting the humans rather than abandoning the zones. He read about the biology section next. Pain tolerance, significantly above galactic average. Recovery time from major physical trauma, faster than 12 of the 31 represented species. Psychological response to prolonged stress, complicated but functional. Capable of sustained high performance under conditions that would incapacitate most comparable species. The Sonari elder raised his hand. How long does this file go? Oris checked. There are 4 main sections and 2 appendices. The elder sat back slowly. Oris continued. He read about human sleep patterns, specifically the section noting that humans could function, not well, but function, on dramatically reduced sleep if required, and that some humans did this voluntarily. He read about the immune system, which had been shaped by thousands of years of exposure to an unusually hostile microbial environment and had developed into what the file described, with almost academic neutrality, as aggressively adaptive. Then he reached the appendix. He paused. The appendix was labeled Notable Cultural and Behavioral Observations, Supplementary File. It had been compiled by a Brenali research team who had spent 3 years embedded on Earth. Oris had not read this part before today. He read the first entry. Humans, it noted, engaged in activities purely for the experience of controlled fear. They called these activities extreme sports or thrill-seeking. They were voluntary. They were popular. He read the second entry. Humans regularly consumed foods and drinks that caused measurable physical discomfort, extreme spice, extreme temperature, extreme bitterness, and considered this pleasurable. He read the third entry. A significant portion of human entertainment consisted of fictional scenarios depicting catastrophic events, including the precise kinds of civilizational collapses that humans had actually survived, and they watched these for relaxation. He closed the appendix. He did not read it aloud. The Sonari elder had already quietly excused himself. Two of the Brenali delegates were leaning together in whispered conversation. The Pulhari ambassador had stopped taking notes and was simply staring at his tablet with an expression Oris recognized as a species-specific response to information overload. Drael, across the chamber, had his hands folded on the table in front of him and was looking at nothing in particular with the careful blankness of someone who had already thought through several responses and discarded all of them. In the back row, Yeva finished the last of her snack, folded the wrapper neatly, and tucked it into her jacket pocket. She had heard the whole briefing. Most of it, to her, was just history class. The biology section was a little clinical, but accurate. She had learned all of this growing up. It was not alarming. It was just how things were. She noticed that the ambassador from the Velhari Union had gone a color she hadn't seen him use before. She made a note to ask her translation guide what that meant. Oris set down his file. That concludes the standard briefing on Earth, he said. His voice was impressively steady. The council will now proceed to formal debate on the candidate's inclusion. He sat down. The chamber was very quiet for a moment. Then Drael said, I will be leading the opposition. Nobody was surprised. Drael did not rush. That was the first thing anyone noticed. He stood slowly, adjusted his speaking panel, and let the room settle. He had been in council chambers longer than most delegates had been alive. He knew how to own a room before he had said a single word. When the murmuring finally stopped, and every eye was on him, he nodded once, as if granting the chamber permission to listen. The Exchange Center, he began, must serve as the permanent home of galactic diplomacy for the next 200 years. Minimum. The host world must be stable. It must be predictable. It must project an image of calm and order to every species we hope to welcome inside its doors. And it must, he paused, not have a history of resolving disagreements through organized planetary-scale violence. Several heads nodded around the chamber. Drael continued. He built his argument carefully, piece by piece, the way a good builder lays stone, each point supporting the next. Earth was young. Earth had been a full council member for only 11 years. Its political structure was fragmented, a patchwork of nation-states that frequently disagreed with each other in very loud ways. Its climate, though stabilizing, had been in crisis within living memory. Its population was enormous, energetic, and, he chose the word with surgical precision, intense. He listed 14 objections. He cited the relevant charter sections for each one. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. When he finished, several delegates were already nodding along. The Pulhari ambassador was making notes. The Brenali bloc looked satisfied. Then the chair recognized the Earth delegation. Yeva stood up. There was a brief, uncomfortable pause around the chamber. Everyone had assumed Ambassador Roth would handle this. Nobody had expected the junior attaché, who had started the whole problem. A few delegates shifted in their seats. The Vorith attaché said something quietly to Drael that the translation system, thankfully, did not catch. Yeva did not have prepared remarks. She had been trying to write some during Drael's speech, but she had kept stopping to listen because, she admitted to herself, he was very good. She put down her tablet. She stood with her hands at her sides, and she looked at the room. Ambassador Drael is right about most of that, she said. That got people's attention. Earth is young. Our history is messy. Our politics argue with themselves constantly and loudly. All of that is true. She looked toward Drael. But he's describing where we came from, not where we are. She talked about infrastructure first, because that was what she actually knew well. Earth's 3 dedicated diplomatic zones. The transit corridors already in negotiation with the Sun Transit Authority. The hospitality divisions that had been quietly staffed and trained for 2 years, waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity. Then she stopped talking about infrastructure. She talked about her grandmother instead. Her grandmother had been born in a country that no longer existed, during a war that had killed 1/3 of the people around her. She had learned 4 languages because each one was a door that might stay open when others closed. She had rebuilt her life twice. She had fed strangers during a famine and asked nothing back. She had died very old, in a small house, surrounded by people who had come from everywhere. That is also Earth, Yeva said. We have been through the worst things. We know what it costs. So when we say we want to host this center, when we say we want to be the place where everyone comes to talk instead of fight, we are not saying it lightly. We have paid for that belief. We know what the alternative looks like. The chamber was quiet. Not the uncomfortable quiet from before, when nobody knew what to say. A different kind. Yeva sat down. She realized her hands were shaking slightly, which happened sometimes when she spoke in front of people. She folded them in her lap where no one could see. Drayle looked at her from across the chamber for a moment. His expression was unreadable. He was a professional, and professionals did not let debate show on their faces. But he asked for a recess, and he asked for it quickly. The chair granted it. As the chamber began to buzz with side conversations, Oris passed Yeva's row and slowed for a moment. He did not stop fully. He just slowed and said, without looking directly at her, "Two of the undecided delegates have shifted. Thought you should know." Then he walked on. Yeva took out her tablet and messaged Ambassador Roth. 2 words, "It's moving." He messaged back in less than a minute. 3 words, "Don't ruin it." She put her tablet away and went to find water. Her throat was dry. The chamber's water dispensers were calibrated for Sonari biology, which meant the temperature was wrong and the container was shaped strangely, but she managed. A Brenali delegate she had never spoken to passed her near the dispenser and gave her a look she could not interpret. She decided to interpret it as positive. She went back to her seat and waited for the recess to end. She had not mentioned the infrastructure proposal documents yet. The real ones. The ones Roth had been building for 8 months. She was saving those. The recess was supposed to last 30 minutes. It lasted 47 because of the terminals. The Council's shared intelligence network was one of the oldest continuously running data systems in the known galaxy. It had been updated many times, expanded many times, patched and improved and occasionally argued over. It was considered extremely reliable. It had never, in its long history, been asked to process a simultaneous query on human civilization from 26 separate terminals at the same time. It managed for about 9 minutes. Then 3 terminals in the east tier overheated. Not dramatically, no fire, no explosion, just a soft pop and a smell that the Brenali delegates found deeply unpleasant, and the Sonari elder, returning from his extended absence, found somehow familiar. Oris dispatched the technical team. The technical team rerouted the load. The network kept running, slightly slower, slightly warmer, like a person who had been asked to lift something heavier than expected but was determined not to admit it. The delegates kept reading. The Velhari ambassador had found the section on human conflict resolution history and was going through it with the focused expression of someone reading a document they cannot quite believe is real. His assistant had already flagged 17 entries. The ambassador had unflagged 12 of them on the grounds that the assistant must have misread, and then reflagged 9 after reading them again himself. The Polhari consensus had sent 2 delegates to the research terminals. One of them, a quiet and methodical senior diplomat named Tor, had made the mistake of pulling up Earth's full recorded creative output index and running a summary search. The summary search had returned a number so large that Tor had assumed it was a system error. He had refreshed it. Same number. He had asked his assistant to verify. The assistant verified. Tor sat very still for a while. Then he had made a further mistake. He had filtered by dramatic and narrative content and pulled a randomized sample of 40 titles from across the past 200 years of human film. He had read the descriptions. He had watched 7 minutes of one of them. The medical team that came to check on him described his condition as a philosophical crisis. He was coherent and physically fine. He simply kept saying, in a very quiet voice, "But why would they watch that voluntarily?" His colleague gently removed the tablet from his hands and suggested he sit outside for a while. In the main chamber, Drayle was not reading the network files. He did not need to. He had read enough about humanity before today. What he was doing was standing near the window that looked out onto Sun Station's observation corridor, watching the traffic of ships moving in slow arcs across the docking lanes, and thinking. He was a very good diplomat. He knew how to lose a point without losing an argument. He knew when momentum was shifting. He had felt it shift in the chamber after Yeva spoke, and it had not shifted back yet. 2 votes were soft. Possibly 3. The girl had spoken well. He did not enjoy admitting that, but he was honest with himself when the audience was only himself. He also knew something that Yeva apparently did not yet know. The formal infrastructure proposal had not been submitted. The Earth delegation's bid was technically incomplete. If the vote was called before the documents were filed, the motion could be challenged on procedural grounds. He did not intend to use that challenge. It was not in the spirit of the process. But he noticed it. He was that kind of diplomat. Meanwhile, Yeva was standing in the corridor outside the chamber, on a call with Ambassador Roth. The connection was slightly unstable because Roth was in his quarters across the station and also, from the sound of it, wrapped in several blankets. The proposal package, Roth said, his voice rough. It's all there. I built it over 8 months. Site surveys, construction phasing, cost breakdowns, the hospitality staffing model. Everything. I was going to present it formally next session as a preliminary inquiry. Not a preliminary inquiry anymore, Yeva said. No, Roth agreed. No, it's not. A pause. Can you present it? I've never presented a formal infrastructure package to a full council session. I know. Roth, I'm a note-taker. You gave a speech that moved 3 votes without notes, he said. You can present a package with charts and data. There was a silence. Outside the window behind Yeva, a cargo transport drifted past in the dark, lights blinking slowly. Send it to my tablet, she said. The file arrived 30 seconds later. It was large, very large. 8 months of work in a single compressed folder. She opened the executive summary. It was thorough, clear, and, she thought, genuinely impressive. Roth had done his homework. She closed it, tucked her tablet under her arm, and walked back toward the chamber doors. Oris was standing near the entrance, checking the session log on his own device. He glanced up as she approached. Recess ends in 4 minutes, he said. I know, she said. He looked at her tablet, then at her face. You have something new. It was not a question. Yes, she said. Oris made a small sound that was not quite a sigh and not quite approval and was possibly both. He moved aside to let her through. Try not to cause another terminal failure, he said. She walked in. The session resumed with the low, resonant tone that Sun Station's chime system produced to call delegates back to their seats. Most of them were already seated. The recess had not been relaxing for anyone, and nobody was lingering in the corridors. Drail signaled first. The chair recognized him. He stood and made his procedural point calmly. The Earth delegation had not submitted a formal infrastructure proposal, which was a standard requirement for any host world candidate. He was not calling for immediate disqualification. He was noting that the record was incomplete. The council should consider waiting for the full documentation before any vote. It was a reasonable point. Everyone knew it was a reasonable point. The chair turned to the Earth delegation and asked if the documentation was forthcoming. Yeva stood up. I have it here, she said. I'd like to present it now, if the council allows. There was a brief back and forth on procedure. Oris confirmed it was permissible to enter new documentation mid-session if the material was directly relevant to the current motion. Drail had no grounds to object. He sat down with the practiced ease of someone filing the moment away for later use. Yeva connected her tablet to the chamber's display system. The first slide appeared. It was not what anyone expected. It was not a list of statistics or a wall of text. It was an aerial image of a wide mountain valley, green and calm, with a river running through it. Infrastructure markers and clean lines showed where the buildings would go. It looked, in the mildest possible way, beautiful. This is the Talvin site, Yeva said. Proposed primary location for the exchange center. Pre-cleared for construction. No active communities within the buffer zone. The site was selected after 18 months of geographic and climatic analysis. It has stable weather, mild seismic activity, well within safe parameters, and it is accessible by ground, air, and orbital transport. She moved to the next slide. Transit corridors. 3 major interstellar lanes passed within easy range of Earth's system. The slide showed calculated travel times from 31 member worlds. Earth was not the closest to everyone, but it was not far from anyone. The numbers were solid. She moved through the slides at a steady pace. Construction phasing, 3 stages, with the first stage ready for occupancy within 4 years of approval. Cost breakdown, below the median for comparable projects in the last century. Security model. Earth had proposed a joint security arrangement, a mixed force from multiple council species, commanded by a rotating chair. Nobody controlled it alone. Everyone had a stake. Then she reached the hospitality section. The exchange center will require staff, she said. Translators, logistics coordinators, cultural liaisons, food and accommodation services. We have a list of 812 humans who have volunteered for this program. They have been screened, trained in basic galactic etiquette protocols, and, I want to be direct about this, they volunteered because they wanted to. Not because they were assigned. Not because of incentives. She paused. We put out a public notice 8 months ago asking if any humans wanted to work at a future interstellar diplomatic center. We expected a few hundred responses. We received over 200,000 applications in the first week. The chamber was quiet. We had to build a selection process, she said. It took 3 months. She closed the presentation. The silence that followed was different from all the previous silences that day. It was the silence of people doing mental arithmetic, adding up what they had heard, adjusting estimates. Several delegates were looking at each other in the careful, sideways way that meant they were reconsidering. Drill was looking at the screen, which still showed the last slide. The number, 200,000 applications, for a job that did not yet exist, on a world that had not yet been approved. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at Yeva. Delegate, he said. One question. Your people know what this center is for. They understand that it means a permanent, large-scale alien presence on your world. Long-term, possibly generations. Yes, Yeva said. And 200,000 of them applied. In the first week, she said. The final number was higher. Drell said nothing for a moment. Then, I see. He did not withdraw his objections from the record. He was a professional, and his objections were still valid concerns. But he also did not add any new ones. The chair called for the vote. Delegates entered their selections. The tally ran quietly through Oris's console. It took less than a minute. He looked at the result. He looked at it again to make sure. Then he forwarded it to the chair. The chair read it aloud. 21 in favor. 7 opposed. 3 abstentions. Earth had the votes. In the back row, Yeva set down her tablet and let out a breath she felt like she had been holding since morning. Around her, the chamber began to buzz. Drail was already speaking quietly with his attaché, making notes, adjusting, because that was what he did. The Brenali bloc was conferring among themselves. The Polhari delegate who had not had a philosophical crisis was sending a message to the one who had. Oris walked past Yeva's row again. He did not stop. He did not say anything. He just placed a small folded note on the edge of her table as he passed and kept walking. She opened it. It said, "Well done. Also, please tell your superior to get better soon. I cannot manage another session like this one." She smiled. She picked up her tablet. She had a lot of messages to send. The official announcement went out across the galactic network at 1432 Sun Station time. Earth had been selected as the host world for the Pan-Galactic Diplomatic Exchange Center. Construction to begin pending final site approval. First phase occupancy projected within 48 months. All member worlds were invited to submit staffing requests and design input within the next standard quarter. By 1445, the human feeds had picked it up. Earth was reacting the way Earth reacted to things. News channels were already running split feeds between the official announcement and street scenes from a dozen different cities. People were outside. There was noise. Somewhere. She could not tell where. What appeared to be an impromptu celebration had started in the middle of a public square, with music that was audible even through the broadcast compression. A reporter was interviewing a woman on a street corner who, when asked how she felt about Earth hosting an interstellar diplomatic center, said, "Oh, that's brilliant. I always thought we should do more of that kind of thing," in a tone that suggested she might have felt the same way about a new library opening nearby. A different feed showed a university campus. Students were on the steps of what looked like an administrative building, holding a sign that said, "We told you we were ready." Yeva did not know who they had told. She appreciated the confidence. Behind her, the door opened. She turned. It was Drail. He did not come in fully. He stood in the doorway, hands folded, looking at the screen for a moment without speaking. On the broadcast, the celebration in the public square had grown. Someone had brought what appeared to be instruments. "You should know," Drail said, "that my opposition was genuine. It was not personal." "I know," Yeva said. "Earth is a very unpredictable world. I know that too. He watched the screen a moment longer. The camera had panned to show the full square now. It was filling up quickly. People were arriving from surrounding streets, drawn by the noise, and when they found out what the noise was about, they stayed. 200,000 applications, Drail said, mostly to himself. First week, Yeva said. He made a small sound. Not quite a laugh. Something adjacent to one. Your species is very strange, he said. It was not unkind. We've been told, she said. He left. Yeva turned back to the window. The stars outside were the same stars that had been there all day, indifferent and permanent. Earth was out there somewhere, a small pale dot from this distance, currently very loud. Her tablet buzzed. Roth. She answered. His voice still sounded rough, but better than this morning. She could hear that he had been watching the feeds too. I saw the vote, he said. 21-7. Yes. You presented the full package. Yes. A pause. Yeva. I told you not to speak. I know. You spoke. Several times, she admitted. Another pause. Longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted just slightly. The professional flatness softened at the edges. You did well, he said. I mean that. She looked out at the stars. Thank you. Don't do it again without telling me first. I'll try. That is not the answer I was looking for. I know, she said. He made a sound that was probably a laugh interrupted by his fever, and then told her to write up the session notes by morning and disconnected. Yeva put her tablet down. In her jacket pocket, neatly folded, was the note from Oris. On the screen, Earth was still celebrating, and it showed no signs of stopping. Somewhere in a mountain valley back home, a site sat waiting. In 8 months of quiet work, Roth had drawn up the plans for something that would take years to build and generations to matter. Today, in a room full of aliens who were still not entirely sure they had made the right choice, those plans had been accepted. She thought about her grandmother, about the 4 languages and the strangers fed during the famine and the small house full of people from everywhere. She thought, yes, this is right. Outside the window, a cargo transport drifted past in slow silence, its lights small and steady. Behind it, barely visible against the dark, was a passenger vessel she did not recognize, heading somewhere she did not know. Traffic on every lane, constant and purposeful. The galaxy kept moving. Earth was now part of where it was going. She sat with that thought for a while. Then she picked up her tablet, opened a fresh document, and started writing the session notes. She had a lot to report.